Welcome to an all-new episode of Get Lit with Lianna, the podcast. Join me as I sit down with a new guest author in each episode to discuss their books, careers, and everything in between. Today's a very exciting episode because I'm joined by one of my all-time favorite romance authors, Kennedy Ryan. You may know her as a RITA award-winning author. Her books have topped Amazon bestseller lists. She's seriously one of the best romance writers on the market right now. I like to think that I'm one of the first people to have read books by her, but that's clearly not the case. She's so beloved across the world for very good reason. But she's on the show today to chat about her new book, Before I Let Go, which has easily become one of my favorite reads of the year. It's an incredible story about resilience, grief, therapy, true love, second chance. There's steam, you'll cry. It's everything you know and love about Kennedy Ryan dialed up to 100. This is such a special episode because I finally got to connect with one of my favorite authors and ask her so many questions about this book in particular, but also about some of her other stories that I've really loved. And a lot of them have actually been optioned and could be turned into film and TV, which is so exciting for me because everyone knows I love a good adaptation. So I'm so excited to have my favorite author on the show today. Without further ado, my conversation with the incredibly talented Kennedy Ryan starts right now. Welcome, Kennedy Ryan, to the podcast. Everybody that knows me knows that you are like top tier, one of my favorite authors. And I always thought that you were like my best kept secret, that like nobody knew who you were until literally like 2 years ago when I joined Bookstagram, everyone was obsessing over you. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm not the only person who knows who she is.
You thought you were gatekeeping.
Literally, I did. I really thought I did. I thought that that's what I was doing, but here you are. Like, I'm just so excited to chat with you because, as you know, I've like loved all of your books for the longest time now. And I'm so excited to get to chat with you about this book and like this new story that you're starting in this new story world, because you're just like the queen of amazing series and building amazing story world. So I'm so thrilled that you're here. But before we start, because some people may not know, I would just love to know very briefly, because obviously we have so much to talk about, but like how you became an author, like how did this whole thing start for you?
Yeah, I mean, my background is journalism. And so I was always writing, but kind of in a nonfiction space, and I'm a special needs mom. So I started writing I started a foundation for families who have children with autism, and I ran that for 13 years. And a lot of my writing really started focusing on autism and on advocacy. So I was writing in like Mom Magazine, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Modern
Love
Mom,
that.
that kind of thing. So that was really so much of my writing, and for like nonprofit organizations, foundations. And then I realized I really wanted something for myself. And you know how, like, I don't know, I was obsessive about reading romance when I was younger. And then, when you get to college, you read the real books, you're like, you get into your real book era. And so I had kind of left romance for a little bit, and I just had a lot going on that was kind of like high stress, like running the foundation, being a special needs parent. And then kind of my whole world was that. And I wanted something that was kind of just for me. And so I started reading romance again because I remembered how much I loved it.
Yeah.
And when I started reading it again, it kind of started, I'm a writer, I've been writing since I started writing professionally for my city newspaper when I was 17 years old. I started writing editorials for my city newspaper. And I think I got paid like $10 per editorial. But, so I've been writing, for a long time.
Yeah.
And, but never really fiction.
Okay.
And so that's kind of my thing. I just kind of I got inspired one day and wrote a story and was like, maybe this is a thing. Maybe I could sell this. Maybe I could publish this. And it became my debut series, which is the Bennett series.
Yes.
And and I guess the rest is history.
Crazy. So I guess now we need to just talk about all of your series because they're all so beloved. But my first intro to you was with the Hoops series.
Yes, I think most people come through the Hoops series.
Yeah. And
nowadays at least.
Yeah. And it just like took over my life in the most insane way. Like it just like totally took like paid rent in my brain. I don't know. And it just like lived there forever. And
That's
then I was like, I
awesome.
need more. And then I read like Queen Move. And then I've just like made my way through your backlist. But those books, all of your series are just like so, so beloved. And I was reading about you and I follow you on Instagram, obviously. And I saw that now you have TV development deals for some of your books, which is insane. What is that like as an author to now have the potential to see these stories like come to life?
It is. Well, first of all, I would preface it by saying that anytime something is options, like it's such a long road to actually
Yeah.
being made. And so nothing's ever guaranteed. But I do have attachments like directors and executive producers attached for all the King's Men and for
Okay.
the Hoop series.
So exciting.
So it's really, really exciting. And
Yeah.
I don't talk about it much because if I do, people want to know what's happening, and sometimes
100%.
it's really slow,
Yeah.
but it is exciting. I'm very involved.
That's
We are
amazing.
definitely moving. I will say that we are really focused right now on all the King's Men,
Okay.
and we'll focus more on the Hoop series, but we're really focused right now a lot on all the King's Men,
Crazy.
and it's exciting. It's very exciting, and I'm very involved.
That's the
So
best. I mean, I speak with a lot of authors on my show, and a lot of them are, I'm just noticing there's a big boom now of all of these like adaptations, which I'm obsessed with because that's my favorite thing ever is getting to like watch a movie that I read a book of that I adored.
right,
And
right.
I'm really hearing now, which is really interesting. And my background's in film and television. I work in film and
Oh,
TV. So
that's awesome.
yeah. And I'm hearing so many authors now saying that they're getting to be so involved, which is such a shift from 7, 8 years ago when I was doing this. I heard so many stories of people that were writing adaptations where the IP was completely different and the people that had started the stories were not involved. So I'm loving that there's so much power in these stories and that they're keeping these authors attached to the projects to kind of have these stories translated properly on screen.
Yeah, I mean, so far, I have calls, with production companies. Like
Yeah.
I'm the only one on the call with the
Right.
production company,
Amazing.
which is crazy. And they're
Crazy.
asking me, what my vision is for
Yeah.
the content. So it's the beginning stages. So,
Right.
things evolve so much as it goes along. So who knows?
Yeah.
But I am definitely not the kind of author, and it's nothing wrong if you are this kind of author, but I'm not the
Mhm.
kind of author who drops my book off and is like, let me know how it goes.
Right, right,
you
right.
know?
I feel you. I feel you. Especially with those stories. They're so important. And
Yeah.
another series that I'm obsessed with, obviously, that you're kind of just starting is like the Hollywood series. What's the official name for real? And then the
Yeah,
novella,
that series is called the Hollywood Renaissance
the
series.
Renaissance. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Hollywood Renaissance series, Real, of course. I released that in the summer of 2021.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be releasing Score, which is the second book. It's a different couple. Like
Okay.
they're similar to the Hoop series. They're all like interconnected
Love.
standalones. And the thing that connects all these stories in the Hollywood Renaissance series is they're making a movie.
Right.
Like they're making this biopic. So each of those stories they're still going to be on set. They're still going to be making this biopic, and it kind of culminates with the movie being made. And so that's exciting. Creatives are my favorite things to write. Like I love
Yeah.
a baller. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with basketball. Like, so the Hoop series was such a sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
But I love creatives. Like my Grip series
Yes.
is singers,
Yes. Like the music
songwriters,
world. Yeah.
that whole world, and musicians. And then this is, Real is a director and an actress. Score is a screenwriter and a composer. So that's a playground for me. Like
I can.
creatives, it's the closest thing to my heart. So that'll be probably coming out this summer.
Okay.
It's been a little like distance between those because I signed a deal with a traditional deal. Most of my career has been built through self-publishing.
Yeah.
And my Skyland series, Before I Let Go, being the first book of that series, is kind of like my return to
Yeah.
traditional publishing.
Yeah.
But I'm still self-publishing. I'm a hybrid author. I love self-publishing. I plan to continue that. But because
Yeah.
I've been so kind of consumed with that, it's
Mhm.
delayed some of my self-publishing projects. But this in 2022, Score, which is the second book of the Hollywood Renaissance series, my plan is to publish that.
So exciting. So how do you manage to do both? Like be a self-pub author and someone that's like on like the traditional publishing route? Like how do you decide, I guess, when you're writing a story, like this one's I'm going to go with myself and this one I'm going to try to like get it with a publisher? Like how do you choose?
Yeah, for me, I was self-publishing pretty exclusively,
Yeah.
or I did the Bennett series, which was traditionally published. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then I did the Soul series, which was, gosh, maybe 2015, somewhere around there, 2015. And I've been self-publishing pretty much ever since.
Right.
And my first kind of like dipping my toe into publishing with someone else was actually Queen Move.
Okay.
It wasn't a large publisher. It was a small press called Blue Box Press. And they also do 1001 Dark Nights, the novellas.
Yeah.
This was Blue Box is like their first foray into like full length publishing. And so Queen Move was one of their first full-length novels. Okay. And it was such a good experience. It hit the USA Today list. I mean,
I love that book so much.
It's part of all the Kingsmen. So it's been optioned for film and television. Like, it was a really good experience for me.
Yeah.
And then I Long Shot, which is the first book of the Hoop series, it won the RITA award, when it was still called the RITA. Now it's called the Vivian, which I like a lot. I know. A lot better because it's named after Vivian Stevens, who actually founded the RWA, a Black woman who founded the RWA. But so I got the last of the RITAs. I literally asked them, could we rename my award the Vivian? They were like, that's not how that works. But when Long Shot won the RITA, it brought a lot of attention. A lot of people were like, who is this girl? Where did she come from? What's going on with her? And my agent actually had a lot of traditional publishers come to us and say, we would like to, we know that Kennedy, is a self-published author, but we would like to work with her. So we had an opportunity, where there was a lot of interest. And I didn't do it right away. It actually took me like 2 years from the point where people were coming to us asking if I was interested in going back to traditional publishing to do it. And it really had to be the right project. It had to be the right partnership.
Yeah.
For me, a book like Before I Let Go, it's a big book. You know what I mean? It's like, I felt like there's such a universality. I think there's a universality to everything I write.
I agree. I was just going to interject and say that. But this book is something different. It really is something different.
It is something different. And I felt like I think there are elements of women's fiction in everything I write. But with Before I Let Go, it really feels more purely like romantic women's fiction, maybe than anything I've ever written before. I had a vision for the cover.
It's the most gorgeous. I have 3 copies of that book, and I intend on. I mean, I would love to keep all 3. I did a giveaway, so I have to give one away, but I still have the other 2. I'm obsessed.
I'm obsessed.
Yeah,
it really turned out even better than I thought, but. My vision for that book, and I think their vision for that book, it felt like this is a book that will reach, this is a book that potentially would have like a real reach, like a book club reach too, which it has, it's been picked up by a few book clubs. It was selected for Book of the Month, and it's that story. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just felt like this is the story that has that kind of reach.
Yeah.
And for me, I love to see, a beautiful Black woman on the cover. And I've been on tour. I did 5 cities in 7 days.
Crazy.
Before I Let Go. Every airport I went into, it was there on the bestseller, like the airport bestseller list.
That's insane.
It's amazing. And people have been sending me all the pictures of, Before I Let Go in Target, Waterstones, and, in the UK.
Yeah.
It's everywhere over there. And they just selected it as one of the best paperbacks of the year. I'm just like,
I can't.
It's just amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's my favorite hands down book of the year. And I could say that.
Oh my gosh.
On confidence. No, I was unwell reading. Okay. So I always try to read my books before my podcast, like close enough that I can remember every detail when we're having a conversation, right? So first of all, having an ARC copy of this book for so long and not reading it was so hard for me. Like, and then I started getting the physical copies and I was like, how am I not reading? And then people around me start reading it, like fellow bookstagrammers and book talkers. And I'm like, this is so painful. Why did I record? Like, why am I recording this podcast so late? Like, what am I doing? And then finally this week, I'm like, okay, it's time. Like I can pick up the book. And I just started like devouring it. And I was like, I have to go slower. Like I couldn't stop. And then I had 150 pages last night. And I literally said to my boyfriend, I'm like, I have to read. I have this podcast tomorrow, but I'm scared about like how fast I'm going to go through 150 pages. Like I had to like pace myself. It's the most like raw, heartbreaking, honest. Like I actually felt like I was being like, I had like my insides were like twisting while I was reading this book. Like I just felt so deeply for both Yasmin and Josiah in this story. Like it's so much. So before we talk about this, because I have so many questions, I literally wrote them down and I normally don't take notes for interviews. I just don't want to forget anything. But for those who are listening who have not yet read the book, though I'm sure everybody has, a little brief synopsis of what this story is about.
This is a divorced couple, so you start off already knowing, gosh. And when I wrote this book, I wanted it to feel almost like a little hopeless, because this is a divorced couple.
Yeah.
They're very broken as a couple, as a family. They've been divorced for almost 2 years. They have 2 children. They have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. So these are grown folks. This is a mature story. And I really leaned into that. They own a business together. They run a restaurant called Grits in Atlanta. And there's an amazing friend group. Hendrix and Soledad are Yasmin's best friends.
Yeah.
And she is, when we start the book, and there's a great dog named Otis Redding.
I'm obsessed with the dog. Obsessed with the dog. Beyond.
A great name named Otis Redding.
So good. Best name. I have a friend who has a dog named Barry White. And to this day, I'm like, that's the best name ever. Like, it's too good. Yeah.
So basically, they were that couple that everybody just envied and felt like they're indestructible. And then they have these back-to-back losses. And I will mention them just because it's kind of part of the content warning. I don't want to do a spoiler thing, but they lose kind of like his parent figure. His parents died when he was very young, and his aunt adopted him. And she is the cook for their restaurant. She's their linchpin. And when she passes away, it's devastating for him and for Yasmin because she's like a second mother. So it's devastating to them personally, but then it's devastating for their business, which starts to kind of fall apart without her as the, mastermind behind all of the meals. And also then, and I'll say this because it's a part of the content warnings too, Yasmin experiences a stillbirth. And those 2 incidents are not very far apart. And it's just a lot for their whole family. And Yasmin goes into a very deep depression. Josiah doesn't really stop to process his grief. And it's really a cumulative losses. It's his, losing his parents as a child, losing his Aunt Bird, then losing the baby, and then losing his wife, in the divorce. It's a lot of loss. And he doesn't really have the emotional bandwidth to process it all. And he doesn't stop. And he's very resistant to therapy. And Yasmin ends up in therapy. And there's a lot of on-page therapy in this book. There's a lot of, what I really wanted to was a lot of normalization of therapy. And the thing about Josiah is, I don't want to give all the details, but he starts out very resistant to therapy. And that was a very intentional choice because there are so many people who are resistant to therapy, they see it's stigmatized. And he was kind of like my model character, like for those people to see themselves and to see his growth and how much therapy really was part of his healing journey. Anyway, I don't want to give away spoilers.
No, it's so good.
When we start the book, Yasmin has already been in therapy. She's on antidepressants. She's on the upswing, So I want readers to know that because I think a lot of times people assume my books are sad. And I do understand that it's wrenching, and that a lot of it is, difficult, but there's so much joy, there's spice, there's garage sex.
No, insane. But that's what you're so good at.
I mean, you balance, right? You try to balance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's an
So
overview. That's an overview.
there's so much in that that I need to unpack and talk about because you just touched upon obviously like all of the real major themes and the parts of the story that really struck a chord with me. But the most interesting part of this book, which I was so shocked to learn, is at the very end when I read that this was like one of the first stories you ever wrote and you kind of tabled and then came back
It
to,
is the first story. It is the first book I ever wrote. It's even before the Bennett series.
which is insane.
I
Like,
had no intention of ever publishing it. Now, what I will say, it would be a disservice for me to say this book is that book, meaning this book, I had written it.
right.
But the title is different. The characters' names are different. The dog was not there. Like they did own a restaurant. They did have two kids, and they did have the losses. But the way I've been talking about this is that I never intended to publish that book. I wrote it 15 years ago. My husband reminded me about that book. And I didn't know what I was going to write after Real. And he
Yeah.
said, what about that divorced couple? And I was like, that book is crap. He's like, no, it's not. And so I pull it out and it was crap. Like it was crap, but there was so much work. Like we literally like tore that book down and
But the
reconstructed
bones
it.
were there.
The bones were there. And this
Yeah.
is the thing is I have been very open about the fact that I was diagnosed with depression while I was writing this book.
Yeah.
I feel like this book was waiting for me to grow up.
Okay.
The thing I mean is like in the original version, there was all the pain, there
Yeah.
were all the questions, but there was no healing and there were no answers. And there was no path to healing. And I think I had 15 years of growing up to do as a mom, as a wife, as a friend, as a human, and then my own mental health journey. All of that really informed this story. And if I
Right.
hadn't lived those 15 years, I don't think I would have had the things to say that made it
That's
into this
really
book.
right.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean, even reading it, it's a cathartic experience going from beginning to end. Like you really build that journey for these characters and you feel like, I mean, I was texting my friend because we were buddy reading it and I was like, I feel like I'm part of this relation. Like, I feel like I'm part of this family. Like I'm going
Right.
through it with them right now. Like I'm in the trenches with them right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's such a powerful story, but I love that you kind of said like it's for the grown-up folks, like that you made this a romance about a divorced couple and their reconciliation and the life that they lived and built together and how they were able to like overcome the hardballs from life and kind of prioritize themselves in their relationship. Like, where did the inspiration for that type of storyline even come from?
Because I wrote it so long ago,
Yeah.
at first I was like, I don't know. Then I realized I've been married 25 years,
So nice.
and
Amazing.
I feel like when I wrote this story, if you've been married 25 years, there are points in every marriage where you're like, am I going to be able to do this forever? Or, this person really gets on my nerves and I really get on their nerves. Or, you just have those kind of like bumps in the road. And I believe that I wrote this book at a bump in our road.
Okay.
Not that I was thinking we'll get a divorce,
Right.
but just these questions rise.
Yeah.
Because that would have been the 10-year mark, somewhere around the 10-year mark.
Right.
And those questions kind of rise. And I probably blocked that. But I think it was out of just me navigating marriage on my own
Right.
and asking some of those questions. My husband is amazing, and he's very supportive. He insisted on going with me on tour. He was
So
at
nice.
every stop and everybody loved him. And he
That's so
was
special.
I mean, I would look over, he'd be holding my purse. I'm just
I can't.
he's amazing.
Yeah.
He's amazing. So there was never any real threat that we would divorce, but I believe that it was just kind of like one of those junctures where you're like asking, is this forever? Like, is
Right.
this, kind of just like a gut check on your own marriage? And I think that just kind of out of those questions, I started writing.
Crazy. And then I'd love to know more about like the decision to have this as a dual POV story, because
Very crucial.
yes, I as a reader, I mean, I feel like this book could have been just as amazing if it was just from Yaz's perspective. But then as you get into the whole therapy aspect of the book, it's critical that we get like all of these moments of Josiah and his point of view. Like, how is that writing?
Critical.
Yeah.
You know what? It's interesting because in the original version, The original version was third person,
No way.
and it was only Yasmin's point of view. And for me, first person is so much closer to the bone than third. I mean, there are people who do an amazing job with
For
third,
sure.
for sure. But for me, first person is like much closer to the bone. It's and then so for me, that immediately brought me into a deeper POV, is choosing first. And then to add his point of view for me was a much more immersive experience as far as from a storyteller perspective.
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of people who Josiah, and I don't want to spoil anything, but he's not perfect. Neither is Yasmin. And I'm not interested in writing perfect characters.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to agree with all of their decisions. For me, the point is not for you to agree with their decisions, but to go on their journey with them.
Right.
And to see how they heal and how they grow. And so I think that there's a terseness to Josiah, a lot of the times. And I think that if we had not been in his point of view, we would not have understood. We would have misunderstood that. He has a line in there, and I'm going to misquote myself, but he snaps at her, and he's like, God, we're in his point of view when it happens, and he sees that he's hurt her, that they're divorced. He snaps at her. He sees, I've hurt her. And he's like, I'm an asshole. And he's like, how do people do this? Like, he's like, how it's so hard for me to be with her. Because when he says be with her, they have the rhythm of running their business together, co-parenting their children. They're in each other's lives. It's a forced proximity of sorts.
Yeah.
And he's like, how do people do this? How am I supposed to be with her, but not be with her?
Yeah.
When I thought this was the person who I would spend the rest of my life with. And he's like, how do people pretend they're not, that the whole world is not collapsed on them, and they're like, a beam is on their chest, he's like, how am I supposed to do this? And I feel like that kind of inner dialogue, not having the benefit of that, we wouldn't really understand how hurt Josiah is by the divorce and how much he resents losing her. And he has this one line where he says, I'm really bad at losing you.
Yeah.
And
a sucker punch. Yeah.
He is, he's not good at doing life without her as his partner. And then because like I said before, he starts out so resistant to therapy.
Yeah.
I think some of the most powerful passages are his on-page therapy scenes.
Agree. Those scenes, those on-page therapy scenes, like, I'm just wondering if you had like pushback from anybody wanting to include that. Like, those were so pivotal, not only to the story, but like as a reader and as somebody that like really believes in therapy and the benefits of therapy, like for somebody that maybe would be more like against it or apprehensive to do it, like this is an eye-opening like experience in a book that I feel like I've never come across.
Right.
So I'm just wondering about that intention, and if there was like any form of not necessarily pushback, but maybe like raised eyebrows or concerns from anyone about like including on-page therapy like that.
I think one of the reasons, like I said, I was very careful about who I was going to partner with, traditionally. And it definitely came down to an editorial decision. The editor at Hachette Forever completely got this story, and she had read all my books, and she knew who I was. Like, she knew who she was getting.
Right.
Long Shot. If you read Long Shot and you still want me to come on board, you know what you're getting.
Okay. I actually like went back through all of our DMs, and my first messages with you was after I read Long Shot. And I was literally like, what are you doing to me? I can't breathe. I'm sobbing. Like, I was not expecting this. Like, you have literally, and then I read this book, and although it's completely different, it's that same like realness, sucker punch realness almost. That's why you're the best.
And there was my editor knew who I was, as a writer. She knows that I don't really pull punches and that I kind of just go there.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything I write just goes there. And so she never said to me, maybe we shouldn't do this on-page therapy stuff. Also, she understood, like, my creative process is so much interview and research.
Yeah.
And so I interviewed about 7 to 8 therapists. And then I recruited 3 of them to be beta readers.
That's amazing.
And so that for me was protection. It was a safety. It was a, safety blanket, because if you're going to do that much on-page therapy and you are not a therapist,
You have to get it
you
right.
better have like some professional input.
Yeah.
Because I joke that my writing philosophy is Hippocratic. First, do no harm.
Okay.
That's how I talk about writing is, first it's Hippocratic, like do no harm.
Right.
And so for me to tackle this therapy and destigmatizing therapy at this granular kind of level, there was a lot of harm that I could have done had I not integrated sensitivity readers who understood what this healing journey was supposed to be and who have guided people on this healing journey. And so I owe a huge debt of gratitude to the therapist who I interviewed and to the therapist who beta read for me, because they would literally say, oh, no, we would never do that. That's illegal.
Oh my God.
I'm not a therapist.
Right.
I know I want to get them from point A to point B. And the vehicle I want to use to get them from point A to point B is therapy. And so from a writer's standpoint, I know what that arc looks like.
Right.
But the vehicle I'm using, therapy, is not what I do.
Right.
And so they were really crucial. They were invaluable.
Yeah. This book is just, there's so many layers to it. And one of the most like complex themes of the book is grief and complicated grief and how people deal with grief and those that run from it and those that just try to deal with it head on. And it was so different and refreshing to read about so many ways that people cope, however whatever that coping means. Was that hard for you to write, like to try to get into all of these different people's heads and perspectives? Like, was there one that you kind of maybe resonated the most with that was easiest for you to write? Like, I would love to know about what it was like to write grief from so many different perspectives and so many different types of grief, like mourning the relationship of a marriage, like a marriage collapsing, mourning the death of a parent, mourning the death of an unborn child, like all of that.
It was a lot. And specifically with mourning the death of an unborn child, I also interviewed stillbirth moms, lost moms. And I was very fortunate that two of them were also beta readers for me.
Amazing.
Because I didn't want to get that wrong.
Right. Of course.
So the interview and the integrating them as sensitivity readers was very, very helpful. Because I usually try to, when you talk about like all these different perspectives on grief and all these different experiences with grief, I try to cover those as much as possible in interview and in beta reading, so that I am kind of pulling all these different experiences through my subjects, because I think like a journalist, obviously. So I'm thinking these are my subjects. This is my interview list. This is the research I have to do to find the story. And so that's a pretty exhaustive process. By the time I tell people that, like, if you're talking about percentages, my writing process is like 60% interview and research and like 40% typing. And by the time I get through that 60%, I've spent so much time laying the groundwork for this world that hopefully when I get to that last 40%, I'm so immersed in these people's mentality and so immersed in their character that it kind of flows naturally. Like I knew who Josiah was. I knew who Yasmin was. I understood based on the interviews I'd done and the research I'd done, I understood the different paths they took to grieving.
Crazy.
And I just wrote those. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Josiah is a very different. And for me, even I was diagnosed with depression while I was writing the book. So much of Yasmin's journey reflects mine. I would not have chosen that. I 10 out of 10 don't recommend it. But I got into therapy while I was reading this book. And I tell people that if my therapist ever reads this book, she's going to want her share, because literally they were like, I would be in therapy sessions. There's a section of the book where Yasmin's therapist tells her to be her own gentle observer. Literally, my therapist told me that. You know what I mean?
So it's amazing.
Like, so much of my therapy journey made its way into Yasmin's recovery and her healing. But really, naturally, I resonate more with Josiah
Okay.
because I'm much more skeptical. I'm much more closed off. My journey to therapy was similar in that I kind of avoided it in a lot of ways. I went
Mhm.
to a writing coach, then I went to a life coach, and then I mean, I was like everything but every and anything but a therapist. And finally, when I went to the life coach, we were talking, and she was like, "The rigors of life coaching would break you." She said, "You need to see a therapist."
Wow. That's some like truth paste right there. Like,
That's true.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
true. Yeah.
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 Wow. I mean, obviously this book does have heavy moments, but it has so much like happy, like
Yes.
funny and like there's so much levity, especially towards the end of the book and the reconciliation and in the flashbacks. Like I just need to talk about like Yaz and Josiah's like chemistry because it's
Yes.
insane. And like the thing that you do so well, and I always have said this to you about you is like you make me cry and you make like all readers, like you make all readers cry and you make all readers like horny, like very quickly. Like you do the shift very well, very fast, I find, which is super hard to do. But
Right.
like the chemistry, especially with this couple, it's just like off the rock, like off the charts, but like it just is flying off the page. Was that
Right.
so fun for you to write, especially when it's like seeped in so much like trauma at the same time?
Yes. It was very crucial because it's a little bit of a slow burn.
Yes, but
Like,
it's perfect. It's perfectly paced.
she's like, no slander.
No, wait, I have to add the caveat that it doesn't matter because it's perfect.
Right. But because it is a little bit of a slow burn, their chemistry is like the carrot I dangled to the reader the whole time. So even though they're not together, I wanted their attraction to feel
Mhm,
palpable, even when they're not together.
mhm.
And there's only one full-on flashback scene, like where we actually go back into the past. There's only one of those because I
Yeah.
didn't want to jerk the reader all around.
Yeah.
But in their minds,
You hear like bits.
back
Right.
we think back to the past and they think about their sex life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They think about times when they wanted each other so much they like pulled into an abandoned parking lot to have sex, and it's like, ooh, 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 when's that gonna happen? When's that gonna happen? We want some of that.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's just like the carrot that you kind of dangle
Yeah.
so that the reader knows when they get together, this is how they're gonna be, but
Right.
only better.
Yeah.
And so that was very, very strategic because I felt
Mhm.
like I don't want my readers to get too impatient not having like actual sex scenes. So they had a lot of fantasy, honestly, a
Yeah.
lot of like Josiah around Yasmin is always aroused, like
Yes, always.
constantly.
And that's why the dual POV for all the different reasons, but especially in that circumstance, like when talking about their relationship and how they were feeling towards each other even when they were apart, like it was
Right.
absolutely critical for the end game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed. And I think that having understanding, there was like this dichotomy. There's a contrast between the face and the face of Josiah, like what he's showing to Yasmin and what he's saying. There's such a contrast between what he's telling her and what he's presenting and what he's feeling. Because he's presenting this like terse, implacable kind of like mask, like I'm
Mhm.
over you, I don't feel anything. And it's all this stuff that's boiling underneath where he just wants her all the time. And
Yes.
he respects her and he loves her and he admires her. He is like, he's my piner, he's
Yes.
like,
Yes.
it's pining. It's pining.
It's so good. And like just all of the other characters in the book, like their kids and Yaz's friends and like Sai's friends, the people that work at the restaurant, like all of these other people, like it just builds such a big story world. So like what's going to happen now? Because I know that like this is as you do best, like you're just going to continue to build and build and build. So can you like
Yeah.
tease as to what maybe is like gonna happen?
Next.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Yasmin, of course, is the heroine in this book. She has two amazing best friends,
Yes. Love them.
Soledad, Soledad and Hendrix. And they provide, especially Hendrix, provide a lot of comic relief.
Yes.
Like so much levity, like the conversations they have are so authentic and so funny. And I really wanted people to feel like this is how I am with my friends, or this is how I wish I was with my friends.
Yeah.
And so we do get stories for them. Soledad's story is next. I'm writing it now. And Hendrix will be third. And
That's so exciting.
I'm so excited about these stories. Like this world is just, I don't know, it's so real. It's a fictional community that's inspired by actual in-town communities, in-town neighborhoods in Atlanta,
Okay.
like the neighborhoods that kind of pop up. If anyone who's familiar with Atlanta is familiar with those kind of like in-town neighborhoods that pop up right around the city. And so there were actually times, and I lived, I'm a honorary ATLE, and I lived in years.
Wow.
We moved to North Carolina recently, but the book is set completely in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Charlotte. I also lived in Charlotte, set for a little bit in Charlotte, mostly Atlanta. And even though I was living in Atlanta, in one of those neighborhoods, there were times when I was writing where I would go to one particular community called Virginia Highlands.
Okay.
And I would get an Airbnb in Virginia Highlands. And literally my house was 15 minutes away. I would get an Airbnb in Virginia Highlands and I would write there. I would walk the streets. There's a park in this book called Sky Park.
Yeah.
It's based on a park in Virginia Highlands called Baha'i. And it's this big Baha'i sign, it's a big sky sign. Like I embedded in that space and in those communities.
Mm-hmm.
And chapter 13 is which is like the flashback chapter, is probably one of the most raw, difficult, wrenching chapters. I remember exactly which Airbnb I was in Virginia Highlands when I wrote that chapter.
Crazy.
Like Atlanta's just like another character for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
The setting is such a strong piece of this story.
Oh my gosh.
And food,
obviously, so much food. And I love that you included those recipes at the back of the book.
Yes.
I'm very excited to make that lemon pound cake.
So many people have been sending me photos of their lemon pound cakes.
I'm very excited about it. I'm actually going to go to the grocery store this week and make sure I have all the ingredients, and I'll send you a picture. I'll make it this weekend. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I feel like that's it. I mean, I took so much of your time. I could talk to you literally.
I love this. I love
you in the face. I mean, you just know how much I love you in all of your books, and I wish I could have done this like deep dive with every book of yours that I've read. But like now that I have this, we'll just keep doing it for all the future books.
I'm down. I am down.
Oh, you're the best ever. This was so much fun. Thank you for writing this book. Like such a special story. I know everybody that's read it has really loved it, but it's really like a highlight of the year for me. And it's going to be a future reread. And it's just like, it's such, I mean, you know how much romance I read. This is like really it's so much more than a traditional love story. Like it's really, really, it's an important book. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I love you a lot.
That means so much coming from you. Thank you.